Welcome back to the Boca Podcast. I am your host, Nathan Holritz, and it is a privilege to have you here today. If you're watching on the live stream on youtube.com/photogsedit or at facebook.com/Boca Podcast, make sure to chime in with comments, say hello, ask questions, make comments, send funny emojis if you want to, because my guests today are none other than Jon and Erica Hayes. They're here with me, and I welcome you guys. Thank you for making time to hang out with me and everybody else.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us. We're really excited to be back on the podcast with you and spend some time talking about some of our favorite things. So this is great. Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you.
And to that end, I mean, you mentioned being on the show before, so you are one of our relatively few return guests. So, by the way, that means that you're really, really cool, just so you know. But in all seriousness, you came on the show back in episode 224, which, let me look here at my notes, I think is back, 2019, February of 2019. So it's been a couple of years, which is kind of crazy. We're going to kind of continue the conversation around brand photography and more specifically how to plan and prepare for a successful brand photography shoot. We'll do that here in just a second, but I have to ask you guys something. And as I do this, I'm going to share my, there we go. So for everybody that is listening to the audio version, I've got Jon and Erica's Instagram account pulled up here. And we'll link to this in the show notes. It's Erica and Jon, Jon, and we'll link to that in the show notes. But if I scroll down just a little bit, there's this recent post. I'm not going to turn the sound on, but I have to at least click on it here.
No.
This post from April 12th, where you guys talked about how to prepare for a photo shoot, and you've got, I guess it's Erica's hands in the background. Jon's talking, Erica's feeding. You have to see it to really understand what's going on here. But it's absolutely hilarious, and literally had me and Jill, who happens to be my girlfriend, but also runs our digital marketing, produces the show. We were laughing out loud watching this the other day. It's brilliant. So props to you guys for having some fun and doing something that's, it kind of breaks the mold of these Instagram Reel videos a little bit as well.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you. That's Erica's insight. We watch a lot of America's Funniest Videos with our kids, and so got to give them props for the inspiration. But we thought, man, we could make this really fun for talking about photography subjects. So that was installment 1. There might be more to come. So,
a fun way to get people's attention to like learning things, but just in a fun way and making it lighthearted. So Jon's got some nice nails.
Well, it got us literally laughing out loud. And of course, myself and Jill are both looking at Instagram quite a bit for work and personal reasons. And I have to say, and I know that you all have done these too, so maybe you could kind of share your thoughts on this, but I'm 41. And when I think about doing Instagram posts, and more specifically Reels, and even following suit with what's super trendy at the moment, which is like the text on the screen and dancing and like pointing to the text and then pointing to the text that's over here. Honestly, the thought of that, I feel a bit foolish. So I love that you guys were kind of breaking away from that mold. I know you do that stuff too, and it's great. And if it works for you, that's awesome. But I love that you were doing something a little bit different to kind of mix in. Like that style of video that I just pulled up resonated more with me because it actually had me laughing, and it didn't look like you were trying too hard to just kind of follow whatever the trend was in the moment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, thank you. Like I said, it's hard too because there's 2 of us, so we try to incorporate each other to incorporate us together. And so it's like to do that is really tricky. So we're just, playing around with ideas that kind of show our fun personality and how we just don't take our work days too serious. So I'm glad it had you laughing and was entertaining.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, and we'll move on to this conversation around brand photography, but we should all just kind of relax a little bit and not take ourselves too seriously. Maybe I'm just talking to myself, but it was a good reminder for that too.
For sure. Erica reminds me of that daily when she brings me her crazy ideas. So, we'll keep rolling.
I'm just like, assume this character role. Like, pretend like you're in a movie for a minute. It'll be fun. It'll be funny. This is how he is during a session with our clients anyways. But when you're doing it to perform for a camera, it's a little bit more like scary because, you're thinking about it.
Or you're not, because oftentimes people stop me that I know and I forget that they've seen these things. They're like, hey, great appearance in the bunny costume, or, great reel, loved watching Erica's arms behind you. And I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot you see that stuff.
You did that? All right. Well, again, kudos to you guys. And for everybody listening in who didn't actually get to see what we just pulled up or hasn't actually seen that Instagram post, we'll, of course, link to y'all's account in the show notes at bocapodcast.com. everybody listening in, make sure you go check it out. So I want to jump right into the conversation, and we're actually experimenting with a slightly different format. Normally I open the episode with a few introductory questions and then we get into the main topic. I think that's what we did last time you guys were on the show. We're experimenting with flipping that a little bit and just jumping right into the main topic, and we'll ask some kind of rapid fire questions later on. But I want to get into this topic. We're going to talk specifically about how to plan and prepare for a brand photography shoot. And maybe before we actually get into that, just to give some context, kind of set us up for the conversation, if you all would talk to me a little bit about ways that photographers might miss out if they don't effectively plan and prepare for a brand photography shoot. I mean, there may be a tendency for us to just kind of, I got a shoot coming up, I got to run and do that. What are the advantages here, or maybe the disadvantages of not?
For sure. One of the things we tell all of our brand clients is we are never going to just show up and shoot, because truthfully, we believe you can effectively shoot for a brand if you just try and show up and shoot. There's so much that goes into it. There's so much that you have to understand about a brand to really effectively tell their story. And so honestly, what it comes down to is if you don't plan and prepare for a brand photo shoot, you're going to miss out pretty much across the board. Right. Brands have their own unique aesthetic. They have their own messaging that they want to communicate. And oftentimes as business owners and photographers, we're thinking of our own ideal client, and we're thinking of how do we attract our own ideal client. Okay. And brand photography kind of takes that a step further, because once you've attracted your ideal client as brand photographers, maybe it's that personal brand or the local business or whatever it is, we now have to step into their shoes and consider their ideal client. So we really have to take it a step further and think, okay, I've attracted my ideal client, I've got them now, but how do I tell their story? Because their story is different than mine. And we learned this a really, really hard way on, a very low pressure job.
Yeah, no.
We were pretty early in our career, and somehow we were just blown away and blessed with an opportunity to work with the Chicago White Sox. We worked with them a handful of times, but I'll tell you, the first time I'm just glad they called us back, right?
Yes. Yeah, we slightly missed the mark because, you think, hey, we're photographers and we're getting hired for a shoot. Let's go do what we do. And that's exactly what we did. We went out for spring training, shot the Chicago White Sox and their apparel out here in Arizona.
And it's probably important to note that at this time we were transitioning into the brand photography space, and we were coming from a wedding and lifestyle photography background.
Right.
So we were used to wearing, I would wear button-down shirts and chinos and nice dress shoes, and Erica would wear dresses and pantsuits and all sorts of cute things. That's how we showed up to shoot a baseball team outside in the desert, like
in the spring,
like dressed for a wedding in the spring, which is already high 80s, low 90s out here in Arizona.
Yeah, we had already showed up missing the mark because we were like, it's like kind of going to a wedding. We're just going to shoot, apparel and some baseball players. So no big deal. We went and we did our thing, and we took the photos just like we would for a bride and groom, just placing in baseball players. And then we went home and did the same exact thing. We edited all the photos just like we would for a couple.
Which our style was more in the bright and airy type of style.
Yep.
And so that's how we edited their photos in Arizona backgrounds for
a baseball team.
Chicago White Sox.
But for it's
like not just for a baseball, maybe that would work for the Diamondbacks, right? The Arizona Diamondbacks. But for the Chicago White Sox, it was like, but we thought, hey, this is great. We deliver the photos, and they start using the photos. But we realized every time they did, they heavily edited all of the photos that we had delivered.
Interesting.
And it clicked for us. We went, oh my goodness, we have missed the mark here. Mm-hmm. The Chicago White Sox, they're on the south side of town. They're the Southsiders. They're city. They're the underdog. Their imagery, their brand aesthetic is heavy on shadows and contrast and blacks in the imagery. And we just delivered blown out light and airy photos to them with a desert background. Like,
I love it.
These things aren't working together.
Yeah. Well, okay.
So
this whole process is, it's obviously multi-layered. So is wedding photography and other types of portrait photography. But one of the things that you just mentioned that I hadn't really thought about is you're not just thinking about your brand client as the client, but you also have to take it a step further and think about their end client, who they're going to be showing these images to, and how that person thinks and what they're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. Thankfully in that situation, we were given the opportunity to work with the White Sox again.
Okay.
And with this newfound reality, we shot for their brand, not just...
And for their fans, because it's like the fans want to see the apparel that's coming out for the new season, but they want to see it for who they're fans of. Like, they want to see it for the Chicago White Sox, and they want to picture it at their baseball field and in their town, not in Arizona, like bright and white and happy and cheery. So there's a huge importance in understanding who the images are being targeted at.
Yeah, absolutely, because it has to resonate with that audience. And so that's how we shot the second time. We shot, we were careful not to shoot too bright. We shot in a little bit more darker backgrounds than we would maybe normally choose for our own imagery. We edited, skewed a little bit more heavily towards darks and shadows, and all of a sudden, our images were untouched when they were used. We're like, okay, there's something to this, because now these images are resonating with their audience, which is really, really key, just like you said.
Well, okay, so what I'm excited about with this conversation, one of the things I'm excited about is how practical and actionable is this going to be. Because just to kind of break the fourth wall a little bit, you all sent me many talking points actually ahead of our conversation that we're going to delve into right now. We're going to break this up into a couple of different sections. I've got notes in front of me here. I'm also going to be taking notes. You'll probably see me look down at my notebook occasionally. But let's start with the preparation portion of this. What are 5 things that a photographer needs to understand via research, via conversation with the end client about the brand that they're about to photograph prior to the shoot?
Yeah, absolutely. So really, we wrap up the planning piece and preparation piece with a quote that we love, which is failing to plan is planning to fail. And so this is part of it, is understanding your client, preparing by interviewing them and getting really a good grasp on the brand and who they are. And one of those first things is, what are their imagery preferences? Like, what is their imagery style? What types of images define their brand? I think when we think about brands that we like or brands that we shop on a regular basis, we can usually identify a product or service and tie it to that brand just by seeing an image, because they've refined their brand to promote a certain imagery style that people connect with their brand name. And so understanding those imagery preferences and being willing as a photographer to sacrifice your own imagery preferences for theirs in order to serve them well is really a key point.
Yeah, I think that's the first one, is the brand imagery style, something that you have to understand. The second one would be their brand message. And the first example of that coming to mind is just a recent client of ours who's a lawyer, and she's trying hard to break the mold of what a lawyer behind a deep mahogany desk looks like, with an office stacked with books and shelves. And she's like, I want bright colors. I want this to be fun and like an exciting brand that somebody can look at me as a friend who's their lawyer. So I think,
and she identified, and I think she was very observant in identifying. She's like, lawyers, we have a PR problem. People think that we're intimidating and unapproachable, and you only call a lawyer when something's bad. She's like, I want to turn that upside down and on its head. Yeah.
So secondly would be understanding a brand's message, for sure, because even if they're in the same field, person to person, it's different in what they're trying to do with their own personal brand.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing to consider when you're preparing is, who is their ideal client? And, yes, we think of this with their imagery style and their message, but really, like, who's the person that's going to be buying this product or service from this brand? What do they like? Sometimes when we even counsel brands through the process of discovering how they want to style their imagery for the shoot, they have a certain idea in their head, and we, throughout the conversation, realize this isn't necessarily speaking to the ideal client you told me that you have. So how can we tweak these things to make sure that it's speaking to whatever demographic you're trying to reach? And that's really key, because if I'm shooting, just a clothing brand with bright, vivid backgrounds and really fun lighting situations with hard shadows and things like that might trend younger, but their ideal client is the 40 to 50-year-old stay-at-home mom, we're going to have a disconnect there. Like, these two things are not speaking to each other. Absolutely. So understanding their ideal client is huge.
Yep. The fourth one would just be understanding the scope and scale of their project. And Jon can explain this one a little bit better, but just getting the time to get on the phone with a client and fully understand the need for the photo shoot and what they need to do with the end result is just a key, because that really determines and dictates what we do in the planning process.
For sure. There's a huge difference between Well, I always explain it this way. We could take the same product. Let's say it's a shoe. Let's say we're shooting a product for a shoe company. We could shoot that product for social media content and get a bunch of influencers lined up. We could shoot in natural light outside in all sorts of fun backgrounds and different locations.
Sure.
And we could just go for a content creation shoot all day. And we could produce a huge content library of quality images, but the production level is going to be a little bit lower. Or I can shoot that shoe for, let's say it's Nike, and this image is going to go on, store signs in all of their locations around the world. It's going to be featured in the shoe drop. Maybe it's even on the box. That shoe picture has to be perfect.
Right.
Yeah.
And that shoot might look like a team of 10 different people in the production team in a studio taking photos all day to produce one great image. And so really understanding, like, even sometimes it comes down to what's the price point of the product or service, what's the scale of the marketing campaign, and that's going to determine the scope and scale of how we shoot it from a production standpoint. That factors hugely into the type of shoot, because those days look completely different. A content brand shoot and a studio shoot for a perfect final photo look completely different.
Yeah. And then I think that plays right into the fifth thing that we would just say is one of the most important things, which is understanding the platforms and different mediums that the client is going to use the photos for. So it's like, out of that shoot, whatever it is, low scale, super high scale, what are they going to do with the final photos? It could just be using them on social media, incorporating them in blog posts or website, or it could be running, bigger print ad campaigns.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think one of the worst feelings our customers could have would be to invest in a brand photo shoot, get all of these beautiful images. Let's say they're putting together a brand new website. Get all these beautiful images and start trying to plug these images into their website and realize, shoot, these are great, but none of them fit. They're all cropped in really tight, and I need a banner image for the top of my website.
Right.
I need something pulled back and wide that maybe as a photographer is less inspiring to capture because I'm not getting like that nice close-in crop that makes me feel all the things. But from a practicality standpoint, my client needs that image so that they have something to fill that wide aspect ratio on their website. Or if it's for social media advertisements and they need negative space above them or to the side to promote a particular course or product or service, we need to give them that space.
Sure.
So understanding what platforms and mediums they're going to use those images on is huge to serving them well. And you're not going to find that out unless you have that conversation. There's no way of knowing unless you ask, what are your intentions for the images? Like, are these for digital use? If so, on what platforms?
Yeah,
are you going to do a print campaign? If so, where are you printing the images? So it's super important to find out.
Now, these things, first of all, y'all are brilliant communicators. The way that you're presenting this, very easy to understand, very, very easy to follow. So kudos to you for that. But as I'm literally taking notes, like frantically writing things down here, what these things in some ways seem like they should be a given. Like it should be obvious that these questions are asked and these things are understood prior to a shoot. Is this conversation directed more toward photographers getting into this genre, or do you see this happening where photographers in the genre go into the shoots unprepared regularly?
I think that this is more geared towards people getting into the genre and especially transitioning. Thank you. Words are tough. Transitioning into this space from a wedding or lifestyle background where the value of the images is based on the emotion that the images provoke.
Okay.
Not so much on a tangible purpose that is to sell and promote and increase revenue and brand awareness for a brand. Two completely different ways about going around using the same tool, right? And so, it's something that probably should be a given. Oftentimes when we work with larger marketing agencies, they'll come to us and give us a full creative brief, and they'll have the answers to this question.
Sure.
But consider even the small business owner who knows that in order to be relevant in today's day and age, they need to have content. They need to be online. They're not going to be thinking this way, especially if it's their first time. And they're just like, hey, I hired a social media person. They told me I need some images. You guys are great. Let's shoot. They're not thinking through all this stuff. So think of the value. I would encourage a photographer as well who's in this space and maybe doesn't ask these questions. Consider the value you're going to be able to bring your client by asking these questions for them and diving into these things and maybe making them think about things they haven't thought about yet.
So true.
You're instantly going to build value with them, and they're going to look at you as an authority.
And as
they're
a
going to be
hero,
like, wow.
Thank you. I never thought of that. We get that all the time. It's like, oh my gosh, I never even thought like I need a banner space with negative space to the side for my logo. And it's like, yeah, it's easy to not think about that. You're just like, yeah, I need photos. So
it's such a great point, actually. And this relates very much to an experience that I've had even in the recent month or two working with a development company. And the contrast of the experience working with this particular company where I've had to do a lot of kind of hand-holding and guiding and I feel like a lot of times kind of doing the job I would expect a really good development company to do. I'm kind of overseeing and project managing in a way. Mm-hmm. And I think about that in contrast to an experience that I had interviewing a different company a little while back where before we ever even hired them, paid them anything, the number of questions that they asked us immediately for the sake of context, the kind of questions that you're talking about here, but of course more related to development, it was just kind of like this eye-opening light bulb moment that, oh my goodness, this is what it actually feels like to work with a company that knows what's going on here, that's very much in tune with what this process should look like. And ultimately, our experience with them was going to be just light years better because they knew going into the project what it was that we were looking for. It's funny how just conversation and asking questions like this that would seem maybe in some cases obvious can make all the difference in the world. And I love that you're highlighting them. And to your point as well, it is a pretty big shift from wedding photography to brand photography. Even this conversation, I smiled when you were talking about the importance of or putting emphasis on the other person or the brand style versus your own. Wedding photographers are all about their own style, their Lightroom preset and the way that they shoot and so forth. This is about the brand. This is about highlighting the brand, and it really is important that we kind of set aside our ego and our preferences for the sake of the brand. That's an important thing to note. So yeah, massive mind shift. And I have to bring up here, Katie is listening in or watching actually. Katie, thanks for watching on Facebook. She says, loving the content today, great points. And I would agree, Katie, this has been really, really good stuff. So let's keep going. I want to get what we'll start with. We started with the preparation piece, the preparation piece, but just to jump into the planning portion of this. So we've collected the information as you highlighted. What do we need to do now before we actually go to the shoot to prepare for that session?
Yeah, absolutely. So now that we really understand the context of what the shoot needs to look like, what the goals are, understand their brand. One of the things we like to say is we like to get to a point where we understand their brand as if it's our own, like that we could communicate their brand position as if it were our own. So once we get that squared away, it comes down to planning logistics. And this is really a ton of fun for us when we get to work with our clients to nail down these different points, because this is where all the creative stuff just starts to flow. And especially if you really have a great grasp on their brand, it starts to flow really easily. And I think one of the most enjoyable parts of that process for us is that because no two brands are the same, these planning pieces are never the same either. Like very rarely are we shooting in the same places, doing the same things, because the brands need to communicate something different. And so those types of planning pieces, first and foremost, would be locations. We always try and get
actually,
locations
John,
nailed
before
down.
You keep going, if you don't mind, you said something that was really interesting to me. You said, like within 10 seconds of each other, the words logistics and creativity. And I wonder if you can just comment before you get into these various points, how those two concepts can coexist. Because I think a lot of times the assumption might be, if I'm focusing on logistics, if I'm focusing on the planning of the details, which I think a lot of creatives don't lean toward, that's going to interfere with the creative aspect of it. How do they coincide?
Ultimately, I would say this. The logistics side of the planning, it's fun because we get to creatively start envisioning in our minds how the shoot's going to look, but the actual connecting of the dots it's not the most sexy thing in the world, right? Coordinating locations, getting permissions, working through this list that we're about ready to talk about. Sure. It's not necessarily the most creatively inspiring process, but once it's complete, you want to talk about unlocking creative potential. When you have a plan in front of you, start to finish, you know that every I is dotted, every T is crossed, and you know exactly what you need to capture for your client. It unlocks creative potential like you'd never believe, because you're not thinking about all those things while you're on the shoot. You're executing on the plan that was put in place. And so now I get to execute and have creative fun with their vision without second guessing, without wondering, without asking questions. We just get to go. It's go time. And that's when the creative juices really are unlocked and able to flow.
Well, and I think a big piece of that too is without any of that, there's no creativity to be had, because you have a client or maybe two, depending on how many, represent the brand, in an empty space, nowhere to go, like no outfits to change into, no props to like swap in and swap out. So if you don't have that, then you're left just being like, I don't know what to do with you. So you really have to have it all.
And it's miserable. And it's anything but creative. It's absolutely, and you walk away from the shoot going,
that was the same.
I never want to do that again. That wasn't fun.
Well, I think about the stress that comes with, really any situation. It could be our photography careers. It could be some element of our personal life. I within the last year, have gotten into day trading in the marketplace. Any of those scenarios, if you don't go in with a strategy, with a plan, your I guess nervousness, your anxiety levels are already up this much because you're like, you don't know what's coming next. If you go in with a plan, and ideally maybe even a plan B, just in case something goes a different direction, now you can relax in that. And to y'all's, both of your points, you can focus on the creative process, which I think it's a great reminder for all of us, because again, creatives don't tend to lean toward the logistical side, the workflow side, the details. I'm not a great person with details. I'll be the first to admit. But if we actually take the time to invest in that part of it, it frees us up to be the creative. So I love that you highlight that, but let me just let you take this away. I know you've got a lot of points to share here about the planning process.
Yeah, no, that's great. So the first thing we want to plan out is locations. Locations we choose 100% around the brand, and all of those preparation items we've already covered. So for the lawyer client Erica referenced earlier that wanted to be shot in bright spaces with bold colors, we weren't going to pick a monochromatic palette Airbnb type place to shoot her in. That just wouldn't accomplish the vision. So we're looking for locations that have those bold colors, that have those loud, attention grabbing types of aesthetic. And so nailing down the locations is first and foremost it's the top thing we try and get squared away first, because so much of the rest of the planning pieces revolve around what type of location we can lock in, availability, all of those things. And based on that, then we start to lock in the timeline. Well,
and to what Jon just said about locations, because we get asked this all the time, DMs weekly, where do you guys find these places? Easy. It's Airbnb. And I know all the different areas are different, so your area might be different than ours is out here, but that is our go-to for finding just unique homes that might fit the theme or the aesthetic of our clients. So there's really nothing tricky to it. It's just searching and trying to find the absolute best places that you can.
There you go. You found our client.
I was going to say, to that end, I'm looking at your Instagram feed, and for everybody listening in, if you're not getting to watch the live stream currently, if you go to Instagram.com/Erica and Jon, you can see this, but this is April 9th post. And I'm assuming this is the client that we were talking about, who was going for that bright and cheery. And by the way, major props to her too for actually thinking outside the box, wanting to break out of, again, the stereotype for that particular profession. And you guys rocked it with a location like this. This is so cool. Bright colors. Oh, I love it. Break the stereotypes all day long. That's brilliant.
Yep. So once we have that, as far as locations go, then it makes it really easy to next focus on preparing with timelines. Because again, our shoots can typically be half day to full day shoots, and without a timeline of just really like piecing out where we're going to be at what times, working through what different themes and concepts.
Sure.
We could just sit in a single place all day and just lose track of time.
That's what I was saying. Let's be honest. As creatives, we get in a space like even that one you just showed on the screen, and it's like, I just lost track of time because I'm having so much fun in this place. And if I didn't have a timeline to stick to, I would stay here all day. So, but again, that comes back to serving the client too. Something unique. This is just bonus. We didn't even plan to talk about this, but brands can't use 150 images. That client couldn't use 150 images of her standing in that one spot. No. She can use a couple. After that, she needs to move on to the next idea. So again, another way in the way brand photography differs from maybe wedding and lifestyle photography is we're moving through ideas and concepts and scenes and locations very quickly because they need variety. Right?
Although I would have to argue, having been a wedding photographer myself and seeing the way the wedding industry has run for about 20 years now, I think plenty of wedding photographers could stand to cut back on the number of images they're providing per scene as well. They're making more work for themselves. And I think about how, like, even when I got married many years ago, I think the final number of images that I got in my proofs was something like maybe 400, if that. And that was a very large number to actually go through and look at individually detailed. Now photographers are delivering regularly, 1,000 images or maybe even more than that. And the idea of having to go through that many images, I don't know, it seems like in some ways it's taking away from the opportunity for the photographer to highlight the quality of their work, potentially even sell more on the back end as well when they're giving them 100 options instead of 10 really, really great ones. So I had to throw that out there because it's a funny point of conversation. But that's also something really great to keep in mind, especially if photographers listening in, they're thinking about moving into this space and how they need to change their mindset, their frame of mind going into the shoot. It's definitely less is more in this case.
Absolutely. Yeah, less is more, and also it's not as a fluid thing where on a wedding day it's okay, now look and look down and laugh this way and look at each other. It's like
an objective
it's like
experience.
Smile at my camera, look to the side, now laugh at John because he's dancing, and then I want you just to look down at your phone. Done. Let's move on. Like it's just very like more. What's the word that
it's strategic and objective.
Yes,
it's not romantic. There's not emotion there unless we need to pull emotion for some brands. Yeah. But it's very objective. Yeah.
So
well,
I think
a lot of photographers do. And again, I'll kind of tie this to wedding photography for a second because I think there's a lesson for everybody here to learn, which is if we stand back and wait for the person to create the image that we're hoping for, we may either waste a lot of time, we may not ever get that image that we were hoping for. Why not give more specific instructions? Why not be more intentional in the way that the session is approached as far as the photographs for that particular scene are concerned? I think that kind of makes more sense. I think we could all stand to do a little bit more of that, but it certainly makes sense in this context.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. No, I love that. So locations, timeline, the next thing we want to nail down is shot list. And this
ties right into what we've been saying as far as like, once you have the shot, you have to move on. And he has to keep me on this because coming from a lifestyle background, and I know I kind of just took over this point, but it just makes me think like I couldn't wait to get outside with a family because I just wanted to get the little kids and I just wanted to shoot and watch what they were doing and pick up on this detail and zoom into this. And you can deliver 25 images of a kid literally just sitting on a rock, and it took no time at all. But for us, we have a timeline to stick to because we have to transition to locations or we have to switch wardrobe to add in the variety and make sure we're not delivering just a gallery of the same exact feel. And so we have a shot list that it's like, in this look at the desk, once she's at the camera and we've pulled back and now we have negative space and maybe she's laughing for just a fun picture showing her personality, then we move on. And it just really allows us to make sure we provide all the content that the client needs and they're not left going like, dang, we missed out on this or missed out on that. So it's a huge piece to our photo shoot days.
And are you having a conversation, speaking of conversations, do you have a conversation ahead of time where you're developing a shot list with the client? Or are you coming up with those shot lists based on your experience? What does that look like?
So in our particular process, we actually we consult with our brands during the planning and preparation process. We have an exploratory consultation, which is where we cover all of the preparation items we talked about a little bit ago. And then when it comes to these planning items we're talking about right now, we actually bring all those together in our photo shoot planning template, which will ultimately turn into a visual representation, a visual guide for our clients so that they can see, hey, here's all of the things we talked about shown to me in a visual format where I can give Erica and John some feedback, say, yeah, you guys nailed it, you're right on, you're interpreting what I'm communicating, and this is totally aligned, or hey, maybe we need to tweak a couple things, right? And then the other things that allows us to do is it helps remove the stress from the session for our clients because we include our prop checklists and things like that in so that they're feeling prepared the day before their shoot. And then on the day of the shoot, again, going back to the logistics and creative and the same conversation, now that all the logistics are planned, we have the roadmap in our hands. We just execute. And so that's how we bring it all together, and our client gives some feedback in the process as well.
Okay. Very good. Okay, so we started with location. I'm looking down here because I've got notes. I'll bring it up here. I have to think about the fact that I'm on camera now because the podcast, we did audio for so long. I have to remember everybody's watching. Okay, so location, number 1, timelines, number 2, shot lists. What's the next step?
Composition notes are huge. And so this is kind of a tag on to our shot list. But again, we talked earlier about where are these photos going to be used. I need to remember in certain locations, in a certain outfit, with a certain scene, this is the one that the client called out. I really want this for the banner image for my website, or I really want this for a launch image for whatever product or service
I like that.
I'm launching.
Yeah, and this piece also allows you to be the hero, not for your client, but for their website designer. I can't tell you how many times like we've spoken to our clients' website designers and they're like, thank you, like you got the photo I needed. Because again, you're working with such intentional needs for photos. And if a website designer can't fill it with the photos that they need, then they're left feeling like, dang, like I kind of need you to do another shoot.
Sure.
So it really provides you just the opportunity to also just network with different website designers that's happened with us, that now we've photographed one client and she sent us a couple more because it's just she sees that we're able to get exactly what she needs to also do her job. So those composition notes just like, they help us when we deliver the photos for sure.
I love that. It's almost like a framework, right? You have this particular, I guess, set of concepts that you're working toward, and the shot list fits within that framework. That's really interesting. Okay, so composition notes. What's number 5?
So number 5, photo inspiration. And this is probably one of the most fun to pull because now we know where we're shooting. We know the concepts we're going to be shooting. We developed our shot list. Now we get to pull some photo inspiration again to serve as a visual representation for our client. Hey, this is how we've interpreted your brand message, the things you want to communicate. This is some of the creative that we're pulling from. What do you think? And this is what really gets us excited about the shoot because, now we're starting to go, okay, great. I can really see how I can help represent this brand in this space or this particular setting.
Yeah, it's like all of these things we've talked about are now going to come together and look like this. Is this the vision you had when you first called us?
Yeah, just last weekend, actually, we were in Santa Barbara photographing our friends and photographers. A lot of people probably recognize them, James and Jess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great people. So
they're going to be on the show here pretty soon, actually.
Oh, awesome. That's great. Yeah. They wanted some photos on a sailboat, which was an amazing experience.
Okay.
But when I was pulling photo inspo, I'm like, wow, there's really nothing out there except for engagement photos on a sailboat.
Interesting.
But it was still practical and good photo inspiration because although we weren't necessarily trying to communicate engagement photos or like love and romance in the photos, we were trying to portray their brand, we were still able to pull different perspectives of shooting on a boat, different ways we could position them, different areas we could shoot in lanes down that boat so that we could pull this great imagery together for their brand. So the photo inspiration really helps and is a fun part.
Yeah, and I think I would add to that to anyone who's listening and you feel nervous to be like, well, me asking that question is kind of going to make it seem like I'm not a professional or I don't know what I'm doing. But it honestly does the exact opposite because everybody has a social media and they have that little icon where they can save a photo. And if they save a photo, it's because something about it inspired them. And so for you to ask your client, like, hey, what kind of accounts or what type of photos are inspiring to you and that you want your brand to kind of, take that same look and feel, they're going to be happy to show you that because ultimately they're trying to develop something for their own brand, and any saved photo or like Pinterest board they put together, they're going to be like, yes, now's my time to like actually have myself in these types of photos. And you don't look, it doesn't make you look like you're unsure of what you're doing. It just helps you serve that client so much better.
Attention to detail. Yeah. I mean, I think it's great. It speaks very highly of the experience, ultimately what your brand is looking to do, the experience they're trying to create for the client. I pulled this shot up from, I guess, the session that you guys shot on the sailboat with James and Jess. How much fun is that? Had you been on a sailboat before?
No, never before. And I think our stories that highlighted our Santa Barbara trip really proved the point that we had never been on a sailboat before.
We both took a little bit of time to get our sea legs, so it was a fun experience.
Yeah.
You didn't get seasick while you were out there, did you?
No
seasickness.
Not quite.
Okay.
Might have had a few bumps and bruises, might have fallen over once or twice.
Oh, no.
But no seasickness.
Like, you should never wear a dress to photograph on a sailboat. I'm just envisioning just like being out there just standing still and like shooting. No, I was in a squat position. I was like hanging on for dear life.
Yeah.
But it was a ton of fun, and it took us just a little bit to set into it. Just going up and down, moving with the boat, like that really changes your stability when you're shooting. And so it took us about 10 minutes and Jess kind of in her head questioning.
Was this a good decision?
Yeah,
I'm not sure if this was a good decision.
Okay, maybe this will come together. Maybe it won't. That's okay. Like, we have all day tomorrow.
Okay.
But it was a lot of fun.
I was going to say, I'm sure you got some beautiful images out of it. Maybe we get a sneak peek at some point. Okay,
sure.
so again, just kind of going back through this list, we got location, timeline, shot list, composition notes, photo inspiration. What's the next one?
The next two, I think, are pretty straightforward and they're to the point. But propping, planning propping in advance is huge. We want propping that's going to communicate our client's brand message, reinforce the things that they're trying to communicate to their ideal client. And so, I mean, we've got a prop shelf right here. You can see just a little bit of a corner of our prop shelf just loaded with different items. Yeah. But we encourage our clients, to bring specific props as well. And we call this out in advance because, again, we want to remove as much stress from this process as possible. And, there's people are making a significant investment. These are important images for their brand. It's what's going to represent them, hopefully bring, their brand to the next level. They're already enough for them to stress about. So we want to remove as many of those, plans and stress points as possible.
Absolutely.
So we'll plan out all the props, make a nice prop list for them that they can use as a checklist. And then we also end up having plenty to work with on the day of the shoot. Because we've run into that too. When we don't plan for props, oftentimes people aren't sure what to bring. They bring a laptop and a cell phone and we go, all right, I guess we've got a laptop and a cell phone.
Yeah.
So having some variety is really helpful.
Yep. And then the second one, like Jon said, very straightforward, is just hair and makeup. But working that into a timeline, just like you would for a wedding day, you have to allow your clients that time to have their makeup done if they're wanting it done professionally for their photos, and then also getting their hair done in amount of time so that it all lines up for the start time when we begin the session.
And we often really strongly encourage our clients to have hair and makeup done for these types of shoots. A professional makeup artist is going to know what photographs well, which typically that space is a little more than the everyday, but not over the top, not too much. Yeah. So, that makes a key difference in the photos. And honestly, I think our clients' confidence level as well. If they've had some time to feel, like they've gotten ready and they've had a professional's attention and all of these things and all the encouragement that morning, they're coming into the shoot feeling great and confident and their best and ready to go. And that definitely translates on camera.
Yes.
And finally, the last preparation or planning piece, and this is just heartfelt from us because we, for so long, just drove ourselves into the ground. And we'd be like, okay, our client has 4 hours. They've got a half day shoot. That's what they've got budget for. We're going to give them every minute of that 4 hours. We're going to shoot every second.
It's like, hold your breath and go.
Yeah. And by the end of it, we would be less creative. We would be slowing down because we hadn't taken 5 minutes just to grab a protein bar or a handful of almonds or something to keep ourselves going.
By the way, good job with the healthy food choices there, Jon.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So we always like to schedule, especially if it shoots any more than like a few hours, 2 to 3 hours. We schedule in at least a half hour break into the day. And again, it's one of those things. If you fail to plan, failure to plan is planning to fail. So if you fail to plan that break into the timeline, it's not going to happen. You're going to shoot right through it. You're going to be overextended and expended, less creative, and everybody feels it, including your subject. They start to wane. Their expressions are less natural and authentic. So it's good for everybody.
Yeah, and they truly do just need a minute to like grab a drink or just breathe. Just like take in, okay, we just went through all those concepts. Okay, that was great. This is okay. And like then they can prep them for like the next segment that we're going to move into without just like feeling so rushed and uptight and feeling like it has to get done and we're out of time. So it makes it more smooth for everybody.
No, that's great. And it's funny that you're saying this because I was thinking just a few minutes ago as you were talking, I'm like, man, I hate that today, as you guys got in, we were dealing with some technical stuff and then we had to jump right in the conversation. I hate that it was rushed. And I was thinking maybe I need to cut that back, maybe give my guests 15 minutes instead of the 10 minutes. Because you're right. When things are rushed, that can create a certain atmosphere that can maybe affect the interaction. And in the context of clients, certainly, their experience with our brands. And that's the last thing that we want. It's also good to take little breaks here and there just so that we can maintain, ultimately keep consistent that level of energy that we bring to the interaction with the client, because we know how much that can impact the experience. So that's a great reminder. I think it's a balanced reminder too. Our culture's gotten a little bit obsessed with this notion of self-care. And while it carries great significance, obviously, I think maybe in some cases we've gone to the extreme with it. But I think what you're suggesting is actually a wonderful balance. We need to go in and certainly plan for what is going to be potentially a bit of a tiring session, but if we break it up a little bit, it'll be a better experience for everybody and ultimately mean a much better finished product as well. So that's a really good reminder. Now, you guys are super generous sharing all those points, but we've kind of only scratched the surface of what it means to become a brand photographer, maybe even some of this planning and preparation process. Will you just share with our listeners how they can learn a little bit more about this process? I know that you guys are teaching a course around the topic.
Yeah, absolutely. This is such a passion for us, because this really is these are the principles that took us a long time to come to and learn and understand when we made that transition from wedding and lifestyle photography into working with brands. Although we use a camera, and that was the similarity, that's the common point. Really, the approach, the planning parts, the preparation, and the in-person styling the day of the shoot, they couldn't be much more different between wedding and lifestyle and working with brands. So we have a course all about this called the Planning and Styling course, and we cover all of this in even more detail. We give practical examples. We cover things like the perspective shifts photographers need to make when they start working with brands. We talk about how to understand a brand client, how to get to the core of what their imagery style is like, what their brand message is, who their ideal client is. And we talk about how to take all that understanding and implement that into your planning and preparation so that you're sure that the images are going to speak volumes for their brand. I think the most fun part about the course, and the part we've gotten the most feedback on, is actually the styling portion as well. We talk specifically on how to style, different styling principles, and we get specific with food-based brands, product-based brands, personal brands. We break that down, and we have a really fun module of, it's kind of like being a fly on the wall with us, with 3 different real brands that we're shooting for. Yeah. And we talk through all the course principles in those behind-the-scenes nice. Shoots. Some of them are like over an hour long. It's great. And it's been really helpful, I think,
though, to actually see the principles applied along or during the shoot itself. That's extremely valuable. That's great.
Yeah, and I think the feedback on that has been for people to see, we're able to talk through these things in person. It's more production oriented. Again, we're not whispering to each other in the corner. We can talk these things through and talk them through with our client there, because we all have a common goal. We want their brand to succeed. If Bokeh Podcast listeners are interested in the planning and styling course, we'd actually love to make it available to Bokeh Podcast listeners for 30% off. They can find that at ericaandjon.com/Bokeh Podcast, and we'll have that available there.
And we're going to link to that in the show notes. I actually pulled the page up here and scrolling down. I mean, there's just so much content. You guys have done just a beautiful job, not only communicating today these principles, so easy to follow, but ultimately have prepped quite a bit of information here for our listeners and for the photography industry at large. So I think it's wonderful. And certainly we'll make sure to link to that in the show notes for everybody listening in, bokehpodcast.com. You can go to ericaandjon.com/Bokeh Podcast, though. And for everybody listening, make sure you do that too. All right. So before we finish up here, I've got a few rapid fire questions for you guys. This is going to be kind of fun. You've got like 20 seconds. I'm going to be a stickler for this. All right.
Okay.
All right. Okay. So here we go. Let's start first of all with one that's super popular here on the show. What is your business's brand position or the unique value proposition your business offers to your marketplace?
Yeah, absolutely. So our brand position, we partner with commercial and personal brands to plan, style, and intentionally create compelling imagery. And the result is professional photography that promotes people, products, and personalities for impactful marketing that stands out.
Wow. Okay, so you fit a lot in there. But I actually I want to jump to the homepage of your website here too. And forgive me for those of you who were watching, I accidentally clicked on the wrong screen. We're going to actually jump here to the website. So right at the top, above the fold, top of the website, welcome, we're Erica and Jon, brand photographers, creative planners and stylists, and educators. So you managed to, I think, kind of sum up everything that you just said, Jon, into just a few words, which I think is great for a brand position statement. The creative planners and stylists position statement there, or that element of it, is really interesting to me. I mean, obviously that's what you're doing. That's what you're talking about today. But what kind of response do you get to that statement? Because I wonder, like, if I'm trying to position myself as a photographer, but then also adding the planning and preparation element to it, I don't know if that would create confusion for my clients. Maybe it makes more sense in the context of brand photography. Will you comment on that a little bit?
I think in the context of brand photography, yeah, it's what people are looking for.
Okay.
So we've been able to really serve a unique niche between, maybe large corporations that hire a marketing agency and have hundreds of thousands of dollars of spend on a marketing campaign. That ad agency is going to do all of the creative direction, creative planning, talent acquisition, location sourcing, all of the things. They're going to hire a photographer, and that photographer shows up and executes on the vision.
Yeah.
But, with digital marketing becoming what it has and really leveling the playing field to where now it's not just Coca-Cola taking out billboard space in Times Square to advertise. A mom and pop store can advertise online and get great ROI, but they just need content. Again, like we talked about earlier, they know they need content, but they don't know how to get it. Mm-hmm. And so we're able to fill that void and that niche of the big marketing agency on a smaller scale for those clients.
I love it. And truly, as you're talking, I'm thinking about just how inspired I am and challenged ultimately to up my game as an entrepreneur with the various brands when it comes to making sure my clients feel taken care of all around. I mean, literally through the whole process. You guys have thought through everything so that person can almost just show up because you know what questions to ask ahead of time. You know what to plan and ultimately then to bring to the shoot. And I would feel like royalty. I mean, taken care of in that way. So I think it's really great that you do what you do, and I think it's an incredible example for all of our industry at large too, especially those that may be considering getting into the space. But really, to every photography business owner, upping the ante a little bit, I think, is a good challenge that you bring to all of us as far as that experience that we're creating with the clients. But let me jump to, in fact, this is actually a great segue to my next question. What do you all feel like, and maybe Erica, you can take this, is the most important principle behind delivering a great customer experience for your clients?
Yeah, it's summed up into one word, which is just touch points. All along the way of our process of onboarding a client, all the way through delivering final photos, like we have scheduled touch points that we are reaching out to our client, thanking them, gifting them for joining, E&J brands, and, sending them a little something along the way to just fuel them, whether it's coffee or tea, that it's going to help them before the session. And then just something that has always meant the most to us when we've received it from someone is just a handwritten card or note, just expressing their emotions to us. And so us doing the same to our client, because we mean it when we say it's an honor, and we just want to make sure our client feels loved and seen and just cared for, because that's how we truly feel about them when we work with them in our business.
I'm really glad that you say that too. The little caveat that you add, that you really mean what you say, like you actually care about the client, you want to work with them, because it's easy, I think, for all of us, whatever the scenario as entrepreneurs, to kind of go into almost that robotic mode where we're saying the words out loud that we care or that we're passionate about this thing or we want to take care of you. But I'm not sure how much intention is behind those words at times. Like you can hear it or see it from somebody and then look in their eyes and their eyes are kind of deadpan and there's not a lot of emotion behind it. You spoke to the emotion earlier of getting that note, that handwritten note, speaking to the significance of the interaction. I love that. I think that we should all bring that kind of honest intention to the interaction with our clients. I think that's so important. And Lorinda, I'm very much with you. She says, love it, learning lots. Same. And again, I'm truly inspired. I need to, after we get off here, I need to go make some notes about some of the updates that we need to make to our businesses and the way that we're running them, because I really love the fact that you're highlighting the significance of the customer experience, specifically in regards to what you bring to that experience. I think it's really great. So, all right, we'll keep going. A couple more questions for you. Talk to me about time management. We touched on this topic a couple of years ago when you were on the show. Is there a big idea and any, I guess, significant change in the way that you're managing time in the last couple of years?
I think really it's maintained the same. We talked previously about how we divide and conquer, and that's never been more true than it is today. As our company's grown, as our client base has grown, we have to really play to our own strengths. So Erica still, manages our social media and our post-processing from our sessions, and shout out to Photographers Edit for always coming in clutch for us on that. Where I handle the client experience oftentimes and a lot of our back office work. We also brought on, I think if there is a change, We brought on a team member this year. So we have an administrative assistant who helps us with a lot of management of our different online communities and content creation. Mm-hmm. But if there's one thing, I know you said 20 seconds, but I do want to spend just a second here. If there's one thing that we've recently become very passionate about when it comes to time management in general, and I think a lot of business owners can relate to this, as owners of our own business, we never get to turn it off. It's 24/7. Yeah. It's always on.
Sure.
We're business owners. We're parents. We're heavily involved in our church and other things. We're always going.
You also happen to be married too. Little side note.
Yeah, and we're married.
Yeah, we have a married relationship as well.
And we realized just a handful of weeks ago, we had a conversation.
Like 2 weeks ago,
where we were like, you feel like coworker and co-parent and co-lifer, but we don't feel like we're investing any time in our marriage. And I hear so often about people, even if they're not business owners, that maybe their kids are what their marriage revolves around, and then all of a sudden the kids are grown up and out of the house, and then it's like, well, what do we have now? Right. And how much more of a danger there is for us as a married couple, not only with kids, but then with our business baby. Right? Mm-hmm. What happens when that changes in the future? Yeah. If it does. Yeah. What is there? So we've been really intentional since a couple of weeks ago about setting aside one day a week where we shut everything off.
Nice.
And we have a day of rest. Yeah. Because I really think it's just so important. We already found in that week, a couple of weeks we've done that. Mm-hmm. We get more done during the week when we are working by taking a day off than we do when we grind and go. So super passionate about that.
I love that. I mean, we were talking earlier about even the experience with the client where we take little breaks, then it helps us maintain a certain level of energy investment in that session. That holds true with us as entrepreneurs as well. We have to, again, I think in some ways our culture has kind of gone over the top with the whole self-care idea. We're not talking about laziness here. We're talking about intentional breaks and rest and investment in the relationships in our lives. I mean, Photographers Edit, and by the way, I appreciate the shout out. Photographers Edit, while we offer custom editing, at the end of the day, it's really about relationships. We give you more time in your life so that you can invest in the relationships. Also, yes, so that you can do the things that will grow your business. But that's just super important to me because I've been in situations in my life where I saw work taking away from opportunity for me to connect with somebody that was important to me. And I don't want that to be the norm. Certainly with my relationship with my kids, my girlfriend, my friends, my family, I don't want business to take precedence over these relationships on a regular basis. I realize that we're going to invest extra hours here and there, but at the end of the day, what are we left with? It is relationships. That is so important. So I'm glad that you highlight that. I love that you guys have kind of the light bulb has come on yet again. I'm sure you've thought about it in the past, but this kind of renewed investment in the relationship. What does that look like too on that day off? Like, do you guys do something in particular?
Well, we drop the kids off at school and we go on a date.
Yeah, so really? It's a full-on date day.
It is date day. Whether that means, breakfast, brunch, and a day at the salon or whatever. Like, it's a day to, yes, I
need to get my nails done, Jon.
Hey, you know what? I'm all for it.
He's got a lot of reels to start creating.
I was hesitant. So. I went in and now I am there. So let's go.
I love it.
Yeah, it's just time together in front of each other where we're just like talking and, just building relationship with each other.
And we're so much more refreshed when our kids do come home from school that day to really be intentional about family time. Our kids are 9 and 6. They still love us. They still want time with us. And so, to feel refreshed and rejuvenated, to be able to really pour in and be like, let's sit down and play with that toy. Let's go throw a ball together and not be thinking about everything else from the day. It's really beneficial.
Oh, yeah, it's good. I really, again, the reminders are wonderful today, including that one. And I do appreciate that. Last question for you guys. In the last couple of years, any standout book that you've read or listened to that you'd recommend to our listeners?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so I recently came across, I'm the big reader. Yeah. Erica, I read and I talk to Erica about what I read. And
that's how she reads. It's like a read out loud session.
There's a book series called Habitudes, a mixture of habit and attitude, right? Habitudes, written by Dr. Tim Elmore. They're books on leadership. They're small. They're daily thoughts. And what's really powerful about them is they teach leadership through images. And images help, principles stick in our brains. And so they're short enough for me to have an attention span and feel like I have the time to read and digest. but they really help, as business owners. I feel like we consistently need to improve as leaders. And what I really appreciate about his book series is it starts with identifying how you can improve as an individual, as a leader, and then, working into how you can lead others more beneficially. And it has just really great leadership principles that have been easy to and practical to implement into our own life. And again, those images just pop into mind. I get confronted with a situation, I go, oh yeah, that image, that principle, really easy to recall, and it's not just theory, right? It's a principle that you can just insert into your life, and they've been great for us.
I love that. And as you were talking, for those of you watching, I pulled up the Amazon page with, and we'll actually do that again here as I'm mentioning it, with the first book, Habitudes, book 1. It's the Art of Self-Leadership. And then there are others, as you mentioned. So what we'll do is we'll link to this in the show notes at bokehpodcast.com for everybody listening in, and also for those that are watching as well. So you can have easy access to that. I have to ask you one question, though, too. So, Jon, with your tendency toward reading more than Erica, have you guys ever experimented with reading to each other? Jon specifically reading to Erica, like in the evening as a way to relax, or on your date days?
We have not. However, you're not the first person to bring that up, so maybe there's something to it.
Yeah.
Well,
maybe we'll try it Friday.
Try it, but this is what I'm going to do too. I'm going to send you guys a book that my girlfriend and I, Jill and I, read when we were doing the long distance relationship thing. This was a way that we used to connect. We would get on FaceTime or FaceTime audio or over the phone, and I would read to her, she would read to me. And there was one book that we read by Donald Miller called Scary Close. Have you ever heard of this book?
I know Donald Miller. I haven't heard of that book.
I've heard of this one.
Well, and it's really interesting, because I didn't put two and two together. I actually read Scary Close before I ever read Building a Story Brand or Marketing Made Simple, which are just incredible business books. But he wrote this book on how to develop intimate relationships, romantic or otherwise, the significance of intimate relationships, what it takes to get to that place. And it's a beautiful book, easy read. So I'm going to make sure to get you guys a copy, and you can experiment with this, because it's actually kind of a cool thing, like getting to hear the other person read to you and then learning together. It's a neat experience. I'll make sure to get you guys a copy of it. You can give it a shot.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, we will.
Of course. Well, and thank you for making so much time for all of us today. You really gave so much practical information, so many takeaways for our listeners. Our focus here at the podcast is to, number one, add value and practical value. And you guys just nailed that. You knocked it out of the park, to borrow the earlier baseball reference. But thank you for doing that. And of course, we'll make sure, I'm putting this up on screen here, to link to your website, ericaandjon.com. And then, of course, Erica and Jon on Instagram. Also ericaandjon.com/bokehpodcast for the information about the course, which you guys are kind enough to give our listeners 30% off of as well. So we'll put all of that information in the show notes at bokehpodcast.com. But thank you guys once again for making time for all of us.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much
for having us. This has been a pleasure.